Well, hello, this is Susan McCord at the Augusta Chronicle. We are live today with Sheriff Richard Roundtree. He has agreed to do an interview with us, and we are broadcasting it live on Facebook, and we certainly hope you will post your questions that you have for the sheriff. We've also received a few ahead of time, and we're going to start asking the sheriff those questions now. And Sheriff, if you'd like to say a couple of words to get started, you're welcome to.
Yeah, I enjoy being here. When we started this a few months ago, I think it's been a great platform to connect with the citizens of Richmond County, of course. I don't have an opportunity to speak individually with people as much as I would like, so I do appreciate you all and the other media outlets taking their time out of their day to try to bring some of that to the citizens of Richmond County. So let's have at it for 30 minutes.
Okay, great. We had a couple of questions about your relationship with the U.S. Attorney and the District Attorney. Can you describe that relationship? Are you focused on the same crimes as those two agencies? And is the relationship any different than it was with the previous U.S. Attorney or the previous District Attorney?
Well, we've had great relationships with previous district attorney. I work cases with Ashley Judge, and now Superior Court Judge now, and I knew Natalie coming up. Bob Christine, I knew him, the U.S. Attorney now, prior to when he worked in Richmond County. We also had a great relationship with Ed Tom when he was with the Southern District because of those relationships being in Richmond County. And that's been one of the great things about having those partners, that those relationships were established prior to them being put in office, so we didn't have to build those relationships. As far as crime, of course, the U.S. Attorney side, they mostly focus on the federal side of crimes. Now, what they have done, which is unique with us, is offered that federal support of local crime. So not necessarily that we're investigating federal crime, but if we do gun violence charges, convicted felons, or conspiracy charges, some RICO acts, that they see they can prosecute at the federal level, then that gives us a lot more leeway for sentencing guidelines to get some of these violent and repeat offenders incarcerated for a longer length of time. So having that aspect to help us with our local crime issues has been a great asset. It's a great tool to say, we get a person with a convicted felon, they may prosecute them at the local level and may go to jail for 18, 24 months. But if you take that person federally, that they're going to be going away for at least 5 years with no parole. And that sends the message. So that's been a great tool for us. As far as District Attorney Office, because we work in the 3-county district, we're all working on local cases together. So that's pretty much all felony cases within Richmond County are prosecuted through the District Attorney's Office. So we work more closely than we do with our federal authorities. But because even with the FBI office, Brian Ogden, who's the supervisor agent in charge there, him and I worked bank robbery cases together back when I worked violent crime. So that relationship is there. So each one of these individuals we can call up and say, hey, we need these resources. And because they're from Augusta and they know the Augusta area, that gives us a leg up. Not saying that they're folks that are only on Augusta or showing favoritism, but they know the needs. When I tell them about some of the problems we have in Augusta, they can identify because they saw it firsthand. So that is definitely an advantage. So I think citizens of Richmond County should be very excited about those relationships as they exist now, because I don't think anywhere in the state of Georgia that you have that many department heads who had a prior relationship prior to being placed in office. So.
And the 3 agencies you feel like are kind of focused on the same type crimes?
Well, the District Attorney's Office, of course, they prosecute all felonies, so all our cases go through the District Attorney's Office. Then in turn, with the partnership with the federal, they decide some of the cases that we can do prosecute federally, just like the last operation that we did in South Augusta. All those were local cases made by the Richmond County Sheriff's Office, sent through our District Attorney's Office. And then we met with the U.S. Attorney's Office and some of our federal partners, and they said, we can take your local cases and we can take them federal because they fit our federal guidelines. So even though we took a local case and did most of the lead work, now our federal partners say, look, we can send these people away for a lot longer than you can locally. And that's the extent of that relationship, which makes it great for us.
And I think since the last time we talked with you, you and the other agencies have announced the sex, money, murder gang arrests and also Operation 30906. How have those operations, helped with the gang problem, which you said was pretty bad?
Yeah, absolutely, and those are a continuation of our efforts. And like I said, when we first did the sex, money, and murder gang, and I told them that there's more arrests to come, and I made that promise to the people who are engaging in this criminal activity and the gang members that we're just getting started, and that's the 30906 is a continuation of that. We're just wrapping up another major operation that you'll be hearing about within the next 30 to 60 days, a very lucrative major multi-jurisdictional operation that we've done along a similar nature. So we're going to continue. This is just an ongoing effort to weed out some of the constant criminal element that we have in Richmond County. Not just the isolated pockets. As we saw in South Augusta with the sex, money, murder, that's where a lot of the criminal and the violent activity by gangs were being perpetrated. And as you see with our homicide rate, the first thing I told Joe last time when I talked to him, majority of our homicides at the beginning were drug and gang territorial related issues toward the South Augusta area. Being able to crack down on those two operations, we saw a shift where we were having less of the gang violence apparatus and most of the homicides then became domestic in nature. So we actually saw a shift. Now again, we can't take any credit for it at this point, but we do see that by focusing on the gang and the violent crimes in that area, that even though we did have homicides, they weren't necessarily a gang nexus like we saw at the beginning of the year. So now we're hoping to see that trend continue, that we're not getting as many gang-related, drug-related homicides.
And I mean, Operation 30906, that's real specific. I mean, what is it about that zip code do you think has, makes that area more?
Well, see, and that's what I want to tell people before, and I know a lot of people got upset about the title, and that was just a name that the federal government assigned to the case. It was not something in the indictment of 30906. I told them it was an investment in 30906. It was an investment in South Augusta. The sex, money, and murder gang were primarily in South Augusta, was in that area. So that's where we saw the pockets of increased criminal activity. So we wanted to say, look, we're going to invest in your area, and I don't want people to get caught up in the name, because the stigma was not the 30906 area code, the bad area code. Is at that point we saw that you needed an increased police presence. We want to crack down on violent offenders in your area to make your area that much safer. So that's what we're seeing from our intelligence-led policing, that's the area in which they were concentrating in. And you'll see when you nationally, when you look at some of the gang trends, people think that the gangs populate in the most dense and metropolitan area, but that's most times it's the opposite. They go into the rural areas where they don't see a whole lot of presence, so people don't recognize the presence of gang, and that's what we were seeing. Going out south in the rural areas, we were seeing that activity pick up, and that was just based on our intelligence division. So as we get more and more intel there, that's where we focus our resources to start to track and see where these gangs are trying to elevate themselves in throughout Richmond County. So that very well may move to the 30901 area or the 30904 area, based on the migration of the gang patterns that we see.
Okay. We have a question that just came in over Facebook. Is Augusta seeing any increase in crime associated with illegal immigration or gangs who might be affiliated with illegal immigration?
No, we know that's a national spotlight area now, but we're seeing no significance into that as far as the immigration problem here in Richmond County. Last year, I think we had one case that I can remember that ICE came down to detain and interview some individuals in reference to some illegal currency that came down. I'm not saying that's the only case, but that's the only case that was brought to my attention, to my level, that we knew that some ICE agents had to come down and interview some of our detainees. So we're not seeing an uptick at all in the Richmond County area, even though I know, again, there's a debate of the national average, but we're not seeing any ill effects in this area whatsoever.
So is it a priority for the sheriff's office to work on, illegal?
We don't have those kind of issues here. Like I said, we may get one or two suspected undocumented citizens a month that may come through our jail. At that point, we notify the proper authorities. They have 48 hours to come and pick those individuals up. If they don't, then we follow the normal process. But there's not been a case where they've told us, except the one I told you about, to detain an individual. So we're not getting a whole influx here. So we don't have a big concentration of efforts there because we just don't see an issue.
And another question from Facebook, it's very specific. Does the Sheriff's Office patrol the Lock and Dam Park at night? Apparently there's some vandalism going on out there.
Well, I'm sure that's throughout the Richmond County area. Yeah, we patrol throughout Richmond County, every element that we see where we can migrate crime to. And that's where we focus our crime and our patrol patterns based on where we see an uptick in crime. Now, right now offhand, like I said, I haven't looked at the stats. I don't know of an uptick in crime in Lock. I don't know a lot of vehicle traffic that should be at the Lock and Dam area at night. So, that's the issue we may have to look at and look at our stats. But we based on our patrol patterns, based on where we see a high concentration of vehicle break-ins or household burglaries or theft from yards or sheds, and all that goes into a database with our intelligence unit. Then every week they produce a report to the different zones and say, hey, you're getting an uptick in here. You may need to concentrate more of your efforts here. So everything we do is working smarter and not just an isolated area. We based on where we see an element of crime is unusually higher or gaining more clarity than we've seen before in the past.
Yeah, and an issue that's been in the news a lot lately, I guess in the past there's been a real positive relationship with the new dance clubs downtown and law enforcement. I mean, I don't think these clubs are a real hotbed of crime, but what is your position on the clubs and whether they should, whether they have any ill effects and their existence on Broad Street?
Well, I think today is a moot point since that issue was settled yesterday. So I guess my opinion really doesn't matter on that at this point. Just the governing body has decided the direction in which this county is going to go, and I fully support that. Now, when this conversation was being had, some commissions did reach out to my office to try to see was there a correlation between crime, high crime stat, and we saw nothing that we can report to say that we saw an uptick of crime based on those clubs operating in that area. We saw nothing to alarm as opposed to any other bar that's on Broad Street. So we did offer that intelligence to them to help them come to whatever decision they thought was best for Augusta. But again, as it relates to someone to say, we're going to rate a high correlation of crime because of that element of business, then we did not see it, not in Richmond County. Not saying it doesn't exist in other parts of the state, but in this particular area where we looked at, we didn't see an uptick. But again, all we can do is provide the information, and the commissioners have made their decision based on the opinions of the public and based on the information that we provided.
As a general rule, is there a connection between clubs like that and say sex trafficking or drugs?
I can't say it's a general rule. I mean, I think it'd be unfair to characterize that. Any business is like a business. It's an adult catered business. Any business that's regulated properly, who has a proper business license, proper alcohol license, have a proper security plan. I think anything that can be managed without any serious issues. Now, in other areas, have we seen, based on some research and training, that there has been a correlation between some sex trafficking and clubs of that nature? Yeah, absolutely. We just haven't seen it here. But again, I don't think it would be fair for me or anyone else to say just because a person decides to open an adult-oriented business that there's going to be a direct correlation between that and criminal activity.
Okay, another specific question from Facebook. When are you going to start giving tickets at intersections that have do not block intersection signs? And the mall is the example.
Well, we've gotten these questions before, and I tell people we prioritize our law enforcement efforts on what we feel is going to be the direct impact of Augusta to make it safer. Issues such as that, people say people running red lights, people say they're driving with no headlights during the rain. Those are crimes that have to be witnessed by the deputies. If a deputy is not there to see the person blocking the intersection, a citation can't be written. If a deputy is not there to see a person doesn't have their headlights on in the middle of the rain, that citation can't be written. Loud music, if a deputy is not there to witness the loud music coming from a vehicle, that citation can't be written. So people have to understand the fact that we can only enforce the crimes of that nature if we specifically witness it. And a lot of times, the citizens are in a position to witness because a person in a patrol car, if a patrol car is sitting there, a person's not going to run that red light. If a patrol car is sitting there, they're not going to block the intersection. But if a regular car, most times people, if they think they can get away with it, they will. But that is one of those, some of those crimes that are strictly hard to enforce unless we're there at the time. Now, if a deputy observes a clear violation, he may investigate, he may write a ticket, he may do a courtesy stop. Our thing is voluntary compliance. But a deputy should take action if he sees an illegal activity to try to correct it. So people just have to understand that every crime that happens in Richmond County or even in the United States are not going to be enforced.
And I think since we also talked last time, you had kind of a string of your deputies and officers be arrested, and I think you said you were going to do some soul searching, to figure out how to address that and maybe prevent it from being so common. What have you arrived at, and how can you address this? And what's the status of the 5 who were placed on leave, I think, this month or last month?
It's been a couple months ago, but all those individuals are no longer employed at the sheriff's office through either termination or voluntary resignation. We did look at, because most of those cases was based on alcohol-related incidents. And then we looked at some other incidents where deputies, maybe off duty, have been involved in some altercations where alcohol was a common nexus. So my command staff decided to come up with, we're now vetting a new alcohol-related policy as it relates to alcohol within the sheriff's office. We're in the final stages of fully vetting that. I meet with my Citizens Advisory Board because they give us some impact in reference to it to make sure we covered all the bases on that. So once that policy is fully vetted, we plan to implement that within the next 30 or 45 days.
Can you give me an idea what that policy is like?
Well, it's just based on, as far as alcohol-related incidents, what's going to be tolerated, what's not going to be tolerated, the efforts in which if a person feels they have abuse, avenues in which they can seek help. Deputies who witness or have seen or suspect it may be an issue with deputies, or ways to report to try to help that person. Again, not trying to make it punitive if we can save a person's career. So all those are going to be addressed. Like I said, once that policy is in place, we'll be happy to disseminate it and discuss it further. But we did see an issue based on that. We have taken action on that. We're even looking at the possibility of contracting and employing police psychologists within our agency because of a lot of things that we do. We've seen some agencies throughout the nation who utilize police psychologists. So we're very strongly, and we'll be looking at that through the budget process to try to give these officers, because a lot of times the officers don't seek the help because they don't think it's there, and then they think it's a sign of weakness if they do seek it. So we're thinking by having a full-time psychologist with the sheriff's office that just evaluates a person's mental and physical well-being on a regular basis. You take away that stigma of, I'm only going to you when you need help or there's a problem. So that is something we're strongly considering trying to come up with some revenues, some avenues of funding to look at that. We may start off at a contract first and then at a full-time position. So that in connection with the alcohol policy, we've done something, we're revamping our accident policies for at-fault driving policy. So, we're looking at everything we possibly can to reduce any as Chief Clayton said, self-inflicted wounds that the deputies are causing, because a lot of these things we thought can be prevented. And the thing about law enforcement is, if a person worked at a factory or a retail job, and something happens, they have to leave and separate themselves, they have a better chance of going to another factory or retail or a similar job. When a person in law enforcement, when they invest so much time and so many man hours and certification, if you lose that, you lose a career. You have to start all over. So we're trying to do things in effect that try to save these officers' career. And potentially we may save some of them lives or marriages or personal relationships in the process. So, you know, we can't just look at it as just we're strictly trying to lock up bad guys. It's the holistic approach to everything that we're doing at the Sheriff's Office, because we can't go out and help the public and try to heal some of the burdens and some of the stuff we see in society if we're carrying demons around ourselves.
And this is a little bit different kind of question. If budget was not a concern, what 5 or what things would you purchase tomorrow that would make your department better and make Augusta safer? And how would those things help you accomplish that?
The first thing would be patrol vehicles. We're woefully, to borrow Judge Brown's word, desperately in need of patrol vehicles. And the county's kind of helped us the last year try to make up our fleet. We have some of the oldest vehicles in the fleet that we still use in existence, because what happened was a few years ago, for 5 years, the county started leasing vehicles more so than purchasing. And as you know, by a budgetary standpoint, you can lease more vehicles than you can by purchasing. So let's say every year for 5 years, we were leasing 60 vehicles, where you can only purchase 40. Well, after that 5 years, now we started buying vehicles, so we can only buy 40 instead of 60. So over a 5-year period, that's 100 vehicles less than we normally would have. So our fleet is, we driving cars with 150,000 miles on them. We got cars that's over 10, 12 years old. Now, in a regular a non-emergency style event, then that may be fine. But you know, when you're trying to put cars through some precision or high-speed pursuits or trying to get to an emergency quick enough, that becomes a safety issue. So the first thing we would definitely do is update our fleet. That's the first thing we would do, and that's one of the things that we're working with the county to try to do. And then, you know, just bringing in more deputies, so we can, right now we have a very young force, but we also have a force of a lot of deputies who have 25, 30, 40 years, and eventually within the next 5, 10 years, they're going to be coming out of the profession. So we need to reinvest in that, and that's going to take salary. You know, my big push when I was trying to do our salary equalization, even though we're still not the highest paid in this area, I told them at the time we did our presentation, we answered over 377,000 calls for service. Last year we answered over 423,000 calls for service, and still not the highest paid in Richmond County. If you just do the numbers, you know, that in itself should stand out. People, you know, we're doing the work, we're doing the job. That's all we're asking for, the compensation. So if budgetary, if they took the cap off, one, like I said, I would update my fleet, and then I'll just pay the deputies compensatory to the work that they do.
And so for your typical Augusta resident, you know, who probably observes crime happening from time to time, and what should that person do when they see something going on?
And that's what we're trying to tell people, is that we want to be a service agency, and because we went to intelligence-led policing, every bit of information that we have, that we get, is helpful for the overall safety and security of Richmond County. So, and I tell people in the Neighborhoods Association, and it's called Tropical Knowledge, you know your neighborhood better than anyone else. You can come home and you can feel if something's eerie in your neighborhood, or just feel something's not right. It's just tropical knowledge because you've been there so long. You can feel an uptick in traffic, that, hey, it's a lot of cars on the street that normally not on the cars, a lot of foot traffic that's normal. Even though you don't actually see quote unquote criminal activity, you see an increase of abnormal activity. And these are things that we need to know. So tell people, like, we're not accusing anyone, but saying we get a call a lot of times say, hey, house 2 doors around me, they got an awful lot of vehicle traffic. And it just doesn't look right. You know, can you just have someone investigate or look at it? And we'll start looking at things like that. But if people don't tell us that, that's how when people come up and you'll see a meth lab operating in the middle of a neighborhood, or a person is growing 80 pounds of marijuana and come back, and people don't even know, operating right in the middle of their backyard, because these people are not calling in. But then once it happens, then you hear people say, that did look suspicious. I did think something was up, but they don't share that with us. So we're telling people, just share the information, allow us to take it in, and let us process it. And it may not be anything, but it may be that one thing that we connect to say, now we see a pattern.
And so what is the best way that person would kind of relay that message to the sheriff's office? Just call?
Yeah, just call. They can call dispatch. They can call the sheriff's office main number. They can call my investigative number. Just go to our website. They can email us. They can Facebook us. You know, just shoot the information to us in a way they can, so we can get it to the right people.
Well, we've got about 4 minutes left. Hoping you can give us an update on the officer-involved shootings that we've had recently on Marks Church Road and Jackson Road. Are those officers back at work, and what's looking at that?
Most all of them are back at work. They've been cleared through the district attorney's office to return to work. But anytime an officer is involved in an officer-involved shooting, not just his physical well-being, of course, his mental and emotional well-being has to be taken over. So they have to be evaluated and make sure that they are well enough to come back to work. So majority of all those officers have been cleared as far as able to come back to work through our internal affairs division and through our district attorney's office. So I think we have one that we still have some medical issues that they're still waiting, but as far as everything else, all those officers are back at work. The only one that's not back fully is the shooting from last year that actually resulted in a death. And when that happens, we have to wait on the GBI final findings to come back to that. But 90% of those officers involved are fully back to work as a result of those incidents.
Maybe one more. What are your thoughts on Augusta's missing persons, and what's being done to find those people?
Well, we have a missing persons section, and again, first thing you do when you get a person who's missing, first you got to find out is that person that we feel that they're in critical danger at the time, and that's the level of how that person is entered into the system. Do we feel they're in danger, or did they leave? Because you know, people leave for different reasons. Sometimes, and I've worked in violent crimes before, and sometimes people leave under suspicious circumstances. Sometimes people leave under tragic circumstances, and sometimes people leave because they don't want to be found. So we have to evaluate all those cases when they come in. So we enter them into a database, and that person is not removed from the database until they are located. So it's kind of like a homicide case. Those cases are not closed until that person is located. But each one of them is evaluated on a case-by-case basis. But again, sometimes, and we've had individuals who we've located, and this in certain instances, they tell, I don't want my family members to know where I'm at. Now that's kind of hard on the family members, of course, but you know, we do our due diligence if they report a missing, but we report back to them if they're safe. We made contact with them, and then you know, that case is clear. So each one of them is individual. So it's no, just like a homicide case or any other case, there's no set pattern on how you do a missing person case. It's just based on the circumstance of how that person became missing.
I'd like to add one more question. I mean, we have had a lot of domestic violence shootings, I guess, and we always do. But you know, there always seem to be warning signs. You know, how are you addressing that? I mean, what can you do to kind of intervene and stop?
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the things that me and my command staff, my chief deputy, talked about once I came in office. A lot of traditional law enforcement minds cater to the idea that you cannot stop or prevent domestic-related homicides, and we just don't subscribe to that theory. Now, we think all crimes can be reduced or some level of prevention. I ain't saying it can be completely eliminated. That would be ludicrous to say that. But we do feel that there are certain steps that can be taken. And we've done the research, and on average, if you look at a domestic, and this is a nationwide study, if you look at a domestic homicide, just a strictly domestic homicide relationship, on average, it's 5 to 7 police reports that's been called to that house prior to the homicide being happened. That's on a national basis, and that is something that in Richmond County we're starting to look at and pay a lot more attention to. Because again, I'm not saying that we can stop every homicide, but it definitely is not going to increase our homicide rate if we start paying more attention to those domestic cases, those domestic calls. How many times we've been there? How many times that one of the or both of the parties refused to cooperate or refused to prosecute, and start looking at adding those resources and contacting those individuals. Because, like I said, the numbers, they tell a tale. And that is something that my administration, we're going to refuse to subscribe to the fact that you can't do anything to reduce or decrease the level of domestic-related homicides in Richmond County. So we're not going to buy into that.
All right, well, great. Thank you, Sheriff, for interviewing with us today. This is the Augusta Chronicle. We've been live on Facebook today with Sheriff Richard Roundtree, and we appreciate him coming in.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you all for your questions. Some great questions, so thank you.
All right, great. We're going to sign off now.